Hello, I'm Newsflash. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. As always, I hope you enjoy the journey. Now, in this episode, we embark on a journey to Turkey, a land where the winding paths of history, politics and culture meet, only to find ourselves in the midst of what might just be a seismic shift in the country's political landscape. On the 31st of March, Turkey's local elections unfolded with the drama and suspense of a Netflix political thriller, minus the option to binge-watch through the anxiety. The outcome? A vexing setback for the governing Justice and Development Party, the AKP, and its enigmatic leader, President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, a man whose political career has been the longest-running Turkish soap opera in history. Let's take a look now at our report to find out more before we delve deeper into the subject.
The recent local elections in Turkey have marked a significant shift in the political landscape, with the opposition Republican People's Party (CHP) making substantial gains against President Erdoğan's ruling Justice and Development Party (AKP).
The period of one-man rule is over as of today. It is done. The Republic and democracy will go full speed ahead from now on.
The CHP's victories in 35 out of 81 provinces, including Turkey's 5 most populous cities, suggest a potential move away from Erdoğan's polarizing policies. Analysts suggest this could lead to a normalization path, improving relations with NATO allies and adopting less antagonistic domestic programs. Erdoğan acknowledged electoral defeat, indicating a need for self-criticism within his party.
The election results show us that we are experiencing a loss of ground in local administrations across the country. Of course, we will discuss the reasons for this decline we see on the local level.
The elections occurred amidst an economic crisis, with high inflation and borrowing costs. Erdoğan's unconventional economic policies, such as cutting interest rates to combat inflation, have been controversial and are seen by some as contributing to the country's financial instability.
I am someone who has voted for the current government for 15 years. We didn't vote for them in the election, obviously due to the economic conditions and the promises that were not kept.
The election results have elicited mixed reactions from Istanbul's residents, reflecting both optimism for change and concern over economic challenges.
It is a great thing that people are waking up, that people are reacting to certain things, because there is no ethics or justice left in the country. The economy is already going downhill.
While some celebrate the opposition's victory, others remain loyal to Erdoğan, crediting him for the country's recovery from recent crises. This mixed sentiments underscore the complexity of Turkey's current political and economic climate.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. For years, Erdoğan has been the maestro of Turkey's political orchestra, conducting policies that ranged from the controversial to the audacious, all while keeping a significant portion of the populace under his spell. However, the recent local elections saw most larger cities, including the crown jewel Istanbul, slip from his grasp, marking a historic loss that could very well signal a shift in the Turkish political zeitgeist. The AKP's loss is not just about the municipalities. It's a narrative arc in the story of Turkey's democracy, signaling the populace's yearning for change, or at the very least a significant pause on the road previously tread. Erdoğan, a seasoned politician, seemingly aware of the tide's potential turn, had thrown himself into the campaign with the vigor of a man who knows the stakes. From lamenting poor rally attendances to expressing concerns over voter turnout, the signs were on the wall, or more aptly, on the ballot box. Yet the provisional results painted a picture even the most optimistic opposition supporter hadn't dared to envision. A country ready to question, ready to demand more from those at the helm. As Istanbul goes, so goes the nation, or so the saying might now go. Ekrem İmamoğlu's victory in Istanbul is not just a political win. It's a beacon of hope for many who seek a future where diversity of thought and policy is not just accepted, but celebrated. The implications of this election resonate far beyond the borders of Turkey itself. This, in turn, poses poignant questions to the EU and NATO about the future of their relationship with a country that sits at the crossroads of continents and conflicts. Despite the local nature of these elections, the underlying currents speak volumes about national sentiment, touching on everything from economic dismay to concerns over fundamental freedoms and the rule of law. The loss in Istanbul and other key cities sends a clear message about the Turkish populace's appetite for change. Yet, in true Erdoğan fashion, the aftermath of the election was quickly framed as a testament to Turkey's vibrant democracy, a narrative pivot aimed at showcasing resilience in the face of disappointment. As Erdoğan himself said, respecting the will of the people is paramount, a sentiment that, while noble, will be tested in the days to come. The question now is what this means for Turkey's path forward. Will these election results prompt a recalibration of policies, both domestic and foreign? Or will they merely be a bump in the road for a leader known for his ability to navigate Turkey's complex political landscape? Only time will tell. And now we're moving on to our interview. Joining us now is Adam Michalski, Research Fellow at the Center for Eastern Studies. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Thank you for having me.
So I wouldn't like to sound cliched, but when it comes to Turkey's democracy, it seems that the rumors of its demise were somewhat exaggerated, wouldn't you say?
Well, I think that speaking in terms of democracy in Turkey, Turkey has always been a kind of divided country when it comes to perceptions and what we actually as analysts see. I mean, election on election continue on showing to us that Turkey is very much a democratic country when it comes to, counting the votes. There is never any suspicion that perhaps ballot boxes have been fraudulently pumped up with additional votes, even though, of course, sometimes these voices are voiced by some organizations. In general, the Turkish public, the opposition parties and the ruling party all have full confidence as to, who wins the elections and who doesn't win the elections once the official votes are given. But that's kind of the more technocratic way of looking at democracy. In Turkey, you have to have a kind of secondary approach when looking into this topic. And here we have to also understand that the apparatus of the state is very much controlled by the ruling party. And when I say the apparatus, you can interfere in elections in a way that doesn't necessarily break democratic norms, but in a way that doesn't make the elections free and fair for everybody. For example, you can lock opposition members in jail. You can disband political parties. You can cut funding. You can make it absolutely painful for opposition candidates to gain support through these type of tactics. And so all of this kind of is what you should call an arsenal of legal weaponry that the state has to kind of siphon the support towards itself and away from the opposition. And in this case, in this way, I think that Turkey, of course, is far from a democratic country. So we always have this kind of dualism in trying to interpret what Turkish democracy is. On paper, it is a fully functioning democracy with votes happening, with irregular elections, with relatively to no electoral fraud. But at the same time, we have a lot of that kind of electoral engineering taking place behind the scenes, which of course begets the question whether Turkey is still a democracy. I say that Turkey is a hybrid, as most institutions say, and this is something that we consistently see in Turkish elections.
But for all its advantages, for, as you said, the ability to use legal or not entirely legal ways to interfere with the democratic process, and also controlling the narratives, nudging the voters in the right direction, for all these capabilities, it seems that Mr. Erdoğan has not achieved his goal this time around. And whereas when it comes to the previous presidential elections, he was facing a formidable challenger in the form of Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, but he has managed to prevail. Now, however, the result is totally different. Would you say that this is the beginning of something new for Turkey's democracy, but also for the general public? Or is it merely one of these moments when, you're actually still in control, but this particular battle has been lost, which does not determine what the result of the war, if we can use this sort of militaristic comparison, is going to be?
I would agree on that metaphor that you have used with regards to winning the war, losing the battle. The logic behind this for me is that Erdoğan has already won the war, and the war was last year's elections, both the parliamentary and the presidential ones, which he has managed to, as I've given examples, to tinker in such a way in the economy, in the media, as to create himself as an image as the one and only leader capable of leading Turkey through these hard times. When it comes to losing the battle, he's clearly lost this battle in terms of the local elections. And the reason for that, I'd say, isn't necessarily the end of the AKP and President Erdoğan. I'd say far from it. I mean, the reason for this right now, I'd say mainly has to do with the economy. Now, President Erdoğan has told his electoral base when he won the elections last year, the presidential and the parliamentary ones, that he's going to get the economy fixed and that everybody's going to be happy. 1 year now, from that time, we see that the Turkish economy isn't doing any much better. In fact, for a lot of people, it's much worse than it was before. And that has to do, paradoxically, with Turkey's return to a more orthodox economic policy, raising interest rates, stopping the usage of dollars to prop up the value of a national currency, which as a result means that the currency is losing continuously on value, thus creating more inflation. So the problem has to do with the economic crisis in Turkey. I mean, last year it's been blown to such an extraordinary proportion that the country stood almost at the verge of bankruptcy. And Erdoğan had to do something conventional because all his other previous policies were only digging the country further deeper into this economic problems. The problem is that the moment he started doing things right, at least from the perception of financial markets of how you're supposed to deal with economic crises, the problem is that the situation got worse. And that's normal, because the situation economically has to get worse before things start getting better, which has to do with raising the interest rates and essentially making life harder for people so that they spend less and thus bring down the inflation. The problem is that this policy comes at a time when you have local elections, and this doesn't work good for your support, especially when you've been promising people last year that, you know, Turkey is going to be a completely different country when it comes to its economic stability, that things are going to get better. And in reality, things aren't getting better. And I think that this is the biggest problem that Erdoğan faces. And the thing is, he's got 4 years right now to solve this problem. Like I said, he's won the war in terms of the parliamentary and presidential elections, and he's got these 4 next years to revive the Turkish economy, to show that the voters who have given him right now something of a temporary red card by voting for other parties, that he's capable to restore economic order and political order in the country. And I think that in terms of this idea that I'm trying to go for here, it's far from over for President Erdoğan and the AKP. It is definitely, however, a shock for them that the opposition managed to get that much votes, and we don't know how this will impact down the line the Turkish opposition and what type of other challenges that Erdoğan wasn't expecting this result might create. But I think that from this perspective that we are right now, Erdoğan still has full control over the media, over the state apparatus, over foreign policy, over domestic policy. He has all the tools, the bells and whistles needed in order to guide this country in the direction that he sees fit, and that I would say will probably sooner or later, for example, talking about the economy, he should probably sort things out when it comes to this. And as a result, I would suspect that a lot of voters could come back to him like they did in the previous elections. So this isn't the first time President Erdoğan is facing a political challenge. He's already lost elections. I believe it was 2015 or 14, if I remember correctly.
So it's not the first time, right? But from what you're saying, I'm assuming that even though he has control over the state apparatus, he cannot feel completely sure that this will be sufficient. I mean, dictatorships have collapsed in the past, even though they had a much more strict control over what was being said in the media, over what people did on an everyday basis. So he will have to bounce back in the eyes of voters, right? So he will have to reach out for the democratic mandate and seize it once again. So the question right now is, how is he going to do that? Do you think this is going to be through reaching out to hardline voters, essentially relying on, you know, the voter base that he already has, and reducing civil liberties, for example, in some sort of creeping way? Or Do you think he might actually try to take on Mr. Imamoglu head-on and try to produce some sort of new narrative, recognizing that perhaps younger generations are likely to seek something else from the authorities, from the government, and try basically beating the opposition at their own game, democratically, but also by creating a new compelling narrative? Which of these two paths do you think he's more likely to take?
Well, I'd say that of these two paths, perhaps there is a third, more necessary path that he should take in the short run, and that is to look very clearly into the election results and figure out, why did people stop voting for him? Why did they choose other political parties? And why is it that, his old formula for winning elections didn't work this time? If it comes out that, for example, people who are retired, students, or all of these kind of masses of groups of people left, didn't give their vote for the current ruling party, well, he has to then kind of really dig down into the causes of that. I mean, if the economy is the #1 cause for the reason for this, then of course he will be concentrated right now in trying to fix the #1 underlying issue that's causing this. That is the economy. The ideology that he's going to later on possibly, to take out from his magic box and, use it to kind of run his election campaigns is going to be something that we're going to still see in the future. But I'd say that, of course, right now, Erdoğan is facing a new political reality in the sense that he has the mayor of Istanbul, who has been elected a second time and who's probably going to be his main challenger for the presidential seat in the next election campaign. The opposition has shown that it is far from obsolete when it comes to Turkish politics. And this is something that he thought last year's elections have essentially closed the topic, showing him and his party as the leader. So right now he has an opposition that's been revived, that has, fresh wind in its mast, in its sails. And he has to see how to figure out whether it is possible to take back some of these voters. And I think that there really isn't a magic tool that he can take out in terms of ideology to win back the hearts of these people. I think the only magic tool at this stage that can really have a drastic impact is showing that he can take control of the economy, stabilize the financial sector, and bring back the prosperity that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was the reason why he was winning, huge majorities in the parliament, thanks to the fact that he created this new Turkey, this new economic miracle in the country, the miracle that for the last decade right now hasn't been seen by many Turks as moving on forward. And so I think that this is the big juggernaut when it comes to the questions that he's facing, the economy. Once he fixes the economy, then he can, I think, start going back to the more ideological and political kind of debates of how to tackle the opposition, how to win back the votes, and perhaps what new topics, political agendas to throw into the political debate, perhaps a new constitution, perhaps stepping down as president and appointing somebody else from his close relatives as his new, as somebody who's going to replace him. So I think he's facing a lot of potential topics and things that he's going to have to really answer questions to. But at this stage, I'd say that he is still in a very secure position. And like I've said, controlling the state apparatus and all the mechanisms necessary to make the next 4 years work in his advantage.
So the only question, obviously, is whether this is going to work for him. This is, in a way, the ultimate test. You cannot really fake the economic results. I mean, people either feel that there is prosperity or they don't. So if he actually manages to do that, he will have a renewed diplomatic mandate, democratic mandate, actually, on his hands. Adam Michalski was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you very much.
And now we're moving on to Eastern Newsflash, a curated selection of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. Ukrainians whose properties have been destroyed or damaged during the Russian invasion can now seek compensation through an international digital register. The register will serve as the foundation for future reparations from Russia.
The DIA app has revolutionized access to government services for Ukrainian citizens, offering a convenient platform for over 120 services, including benefits applications, tax payments, and business registration. Beyond material damage, the register will expand to include claims related to forced displacement, harm to life, health, torture, and sexual violence. The G7 previously pledged that frozen Russian assets in their jurisdictions would remain inaccessible until Moscow fulfills its obligation to pay war reparations on Ukraine. Meanwhile, the World Bank estimates the post-war recovery and reconstruction cost for Ukraine at a staggering $486 billion.
In a strategic move aimed at bolstering its defense capabilities, the Norwegian government has announced plans to increase the number of conscripted soldiers from the current 9,000 to 13,500. The country's defense minister Bjørn Arild Gram emphasized the need for skilled personnel to meet evolving security challenges.
The Norwegian armed forces will witness a gradual rise in the intake of conscripts for initial service each year. A substantial investment amounting to almost $650 million will be directed toward enhancing military facilities located north of Oslo. This expenditure underscores Norway's commitment to strengthening its military readiness. This decision comes in the wake of tensions with Moscow and neighboring Denmark's recent move to expand conscription. Their Baltic neighbor aims to increase the number of young people in military service by expanding conscription to women and extending the service duration from 4 months to 11 months. Both Denmark and Norway are staunch supporters of Ukraine in its ongoing war with Russia.
In a move that has drawn sharp criticism from human rights organizations and non-governmental organizations, Kyrgyz President Sadyr Japarov has enacted a law that enables the government to label NGOs receiving foreign funding as foreign representatives. Critics argue that this legislation closely resembles Russia's foreign agents law, which has been used to suppress dissent and civil liberties.
President Japarov, defending the law, stated that it aims to regulate the activities of NGOs with foreign financial backing. He dismissed concerns raised by over 100 local NGOs about the law's potential to harm civil society, asserting without evidence that some NGOs have been misappropriating funds from international donors. The president assured that the law would serve as a safeguard against fraud and embezzlement of funds by NGOs, and he pledged that there would be no persecution of organizations under this new regulation. However, some organizations in Kyrgyzstan have expressed alarm, cautioning that the law could severely disrupt their operations, particularly those providing essential services like medical assistance and education, as well as those engaged in human rights and anti-corruption efforts.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates. I'm Anash Revinsky. Bye for now.